Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's media briefing. We're going to get started with remarks from our Chief of Engagement, Innovation, and Operations, Mr. Derek Turner, and then he will turn it over to the President of the Board of Education, Brenda Wolf, and then Dr. Smith. So Derek, over to you.
Thank you, Boyende, and good afternoon, everyone. As most of you just saw, we wrapped up the Board of Education meeting, and I will quickly summarize before I turn it over to President Wolf. Three things were voted on by the Board of Education. First, they adopted a metrics framework, and if we could pull that up so that the journalists can see what that looks like, please. Thank you. This is the revised metrics framework. It stays within the threshold of below 15 cases per 100,000 and the positivity rate below 5%. However, it does accelerate the number of students who can return when we reach the 15 cases per 100,000, and it allows for all students to be able to return if they've selected a return between 5 and 10 cases. This does envision that all the safety protocols are still in place, social distancing, face coverings, and hand cleaning. So if we can pull the slide down. The Board of Education also voted to delay the return of students to February 1st. Originally, MCPS had proposed January 12 as the return date if the metrics are met. Finally, the board voted to adopt a phase-in model that accelerates elementary students and allows for secondary appointments on an individualized basis. And so with that, I'll turn it over to President Wolf for comment.
Thank you and good afternoon. I was very pleased with today's meeting because I do believe that we struck a good balance between wanting our students to get back in school and the health and safety of our students and staff. While I know this doesn't please everyone, what we had were the metrics that were available today, and that's what we relied on and we were guided by. And we will continue to be guided by the data and the science. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Smith now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Yes, I believe that the board has looked at all of the factors that are known today, and other factors will continue to emerge over the coming weeks. And it's certainly our hope of all of us, all the board members and all of the staff, that we can begin to have students experience in-person school opportunities in the coming weeks. And as we move toward that February 1st, that we can begin a more extensive phase-in at that time and bring students back into schools. And so that's the goal, that's the effort. And at the same time, we have to listen to our state health officials and our state leadership and our local health officials. And they are consistent on those 5 to 15 cases per 100,000 residents. They've not changed that framework, and we're going to continue on with it. But they have given us more latitude in moving students back into schools once we hit that threshold of 15 cases per 100,000. So with that, I will turn to Boyende to begin the process of responding to questions and comments.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Before we start taking questions, I know several reporters have asked for permission to record. So our TV staff are working on that, turning on that feature for you all so you can record. And they've also asked if we can remove the spotlight from the interpreter so they can see Dr. Smith alone on the screen. So we'll work on that. And then we'll get started with the first question from Bethesda Beat, Caitlin Peets.
Hi, am I good to go?
Yes, you are.
Okay. All right, good afternoon. I have a question for Dr. Smith and President Wolf, if she'd like to weigh in as well. You know, we've seen the data and we've heard the anecdotes about how so many students are struggling in virtual learning. And I know the topic today is a lot about the return to buildings, but we do have the majority of MCPS students who will continue in virtual learning, you know, for a long time still. So I guess my question for you is what you, as the leader of this district, plan to do to improve virtual education for those students who will continue in that model, who obviously are struggling?
Well, in terms of the virtual program that we have right now, you can look at today's board meeting and see the number of people who opted to remain in an all virtual environment versus those who are opting for an in-person experience when it can be provided. And that tells you a lot. So when you have 160,000 students, you have many different individual circumstances and experiences across that. But we are committed to having an all virtual program for the foreseeable future going forward, because even when COVID recedes and we have, as Dr. Fauci says, herd immunity, and when we have vaccines and all the different things that people are talking about right now, we will have families that will want and need to remain virtual going forward. So we're going to continue to improve it, upgrade it, change it. And as we as educators become more comfortable and familiar with it, and as those in our community and our society build more tools that will make it more accessible, more usable, all those things will happen. Remember, this entire country switched to virtual learning about 8.5 months ago. The entire country in some form, from almost nothing to pretty extensive virtual learning. And that's according to the 74 million blog there, 74 million people under the age of 20 in this country. And so that's a profound shift, but we're committed to continuing to improve, to develop, to refine, to grow, and also to provide options for families as they need them going forward.
Is there anything specifically that you have learned so far that you will use to modify that experience moving forward into the second semester?
Well, one of the things that we've seen is that the virtual environment is both more efficient in that it takes less time for the school experience, but it also takes more time. And so we'll be looking at how we arrange our courses, our registrations for courses for high school and middle school students, the sequencing of our curriculum, how we develop that curriculum. All of those things are happening right now because taking, for example, a full course load of International Baccalaureate courses or advanced placement courses in person every day is a vastly different experience than doing that virtually. And we can see that obviously from the way our students are experiencing that. So some students feel like they're not getting enough, our 5th grade public comment today, and some students feel like they're getting way too much. And so right now, Dr. Wilson and her team are thinking about how do we create that in a virtual world so it's more balanced and more suited to the individual student. That'll be a significant ongoing part of the work.
Thank you.
Dr. Wilson, did you want to jump in there, or Dr. McKnight?
I just wanted to mention that, we do have in place a system where, a process where, especially for our secondary students, that they can have a course load alternative, meaning that they would have an option to be able to drop courses in order to be able to make their course load more manageable. Certainly, we would want them to do that with the advice of their counselor before they take those measures to do so, because we want to make sure that they're still on track for graduation, and whatever they drop, they'll have ample time to fill in their schedule later on.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Our next question comes from Fox 5, Stephanie Ramirez.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for doing this today. You all can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I would like, if you can we discuss more of the parent survey? Just quickly looking at it, it looks as though a lot of the Title I school students there are opting for virtual, and it looks as though you have a situation where maybe more lower income students and students of color are choosing virtual versus other groups that are wanting to go back to school. Are you seeing any kind of gap there? And are there any concerns that what you found in that survey that might exacerbate the achievement gap in the county, which you had noted a couple of years ago was a very big problem in the county.
Well, it certainly is a problem. The disparities in learning that can be predictable by income, by race, by culture, and we're always concerned about that, always have been long before COVID-19 and working on that. I will say, however, though, that the disparities in Montgomery County are significantly smaller in many cases than they are in many other places in the state and nation, and that's important to note. Now, in terms of will the choice that parents make for their children's education around virtual or in-person experience during this transitional time exacerbate those disparities or not, I don't know that I can speak to that at this point and really with any confidence about how that might change what happens with students. But we did notice that trend in the data, and we are concerned about it. Dr. McKnight, did you want to share the conversations you've been having with your team around that data and how we are going to continue to work on it?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, and thank you, Dr. Smith. So we are looking at that data to help inform a number of things. Just who are those families and who are those students who've made those selections, and we want to honor the fact that every family under many different circumstances made those decisions that are factors that we may be aware of, we may not be aware of. But most importantly, what we're going to do now and continue to do, create this partial in-person experience for some and virtual for others, is pay attention to how our students are doing, how they are performing, and really try to figure out what more, if needed, to support students who are not making that progress and continuing with those who showing that they are making progress in a meaningful way. No question about it. I mean, once we all come out of COVID-19, whenever that will be, we will look at overall impact that's been done and look at how we have to differentiate that for the many needs that arise. But we've always had to do that before COVID-19, just for different factors outside of the health pandemic. And so that continues to be our commitment moving forward now and in the future in MCPS. Thank you.
With regard to that survey. And I know also there's a significant amount of families that have to be followed up with because they did not either answer the right way or didn't answer at all.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of that question. Yes, we talked a bit about that at the board meeting today and just reminded our community that, yes, we did say if we did not make contact with the family or the family did not make a selection, they would go into the virtual environment. But again, I think as we think about that, we will continue to look at how our students are doing. And as we're able to phase in approaches, as we are able to provide students in-person experience when it's safe to do so, we'll continue to look at who needs what that will be included in that model so that we are addressing the needs of our students while also honoring the requests of the families.
The first question was, what stood out to you with regard to that survey? What stood out to you the most in that survey?
One thing I'll start by saying, and I'll defer to Dr. Smith or others, is, we put the survey out because we wanted to know what our families wanted. And, one thing that stood out is, and that was clear, that many of our community members do, for many reasons, elect to continue in a virtual environment. And there are others who desire otherwise. And so we didn't know how that would turn out, whether it would be, 70% versus 30%. So we were just anxiously awaiting to see what it would be so that we could figure out the ways to design a program that would be able to meet those needs. So I don't know that surprise would be it. We just really anticipated more so what that would be so that we could begin working to meet the needs of our families and their desires in the model.
Well, and first and foremost, the point of the contact with each individual family about each individual child was so that we can plan a program that works. That's what we have to do, logistically plan a program. As we, over time, look at the data, then that does cause us to ask questions. And as we think about those questions, then we can make judgments, draw conclusions, all of those things about how we can better serve our community. But first and foremost, that information was requested from families so we can plan a program appropriate to their circumstances to the greatest degree possible. Each individual child. I talked to one parent recently who said, I have 2 children in your school system. One is going to stay on the all virtual platform and the other is going to do the in-person. That's a good example of a family's individual circumstances.
Thank you, Dr. Smith.
And then just one last question. If I can, just one last question, if that's okay.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
With regard to the virtual recess, I believe some schools started that today. Can you just go over, which schools are doing this and why the decision now so many months into, why did it take this long to provide virtual recess for these students?
I'm not familiar with the virtual recess. Doesn't look like any of my team members are, but
so this might be an individual thing that schools are doing then?
It'd be an individual choice at a school based on the time available. And, we certainly support our schools, but they are over 200 of them, all with different systems and structures within the boundaries of making sure they provide the program.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Our next question is from Deidre Byrne, Montgomery Community Media.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, thank you. My question is about, so the state superintendent today released a statement, Karen Salmon, calling on Maryland's health department to prioritize teachers and students when it comes to the new vaccine that's been shipped out across the country this week. This might be looking a bit ahead, but have there been any conversations on the MCPS end about creating some sort of plan for vaccines, or once teachers and students return to the classrooms, what teachers, what this distribution looks like, or how MCPS will be a part of it?
We've had many conversations about vaccinations. Obviously, that's a topic on everyone's mind right now in the country and the state and the community. And so the order of vaccinations will not be a decision made in Montgomery County, the order of who gets them. And so far, we've not been given any information to suggest that students will have vaccinations in the near term, that will be adults. In terms of the priority basis for giving them, we certainly would like to see education employees, near the front of the line, because the purpose of that would be to have schools operating at their best level and in their best way on behalf of students. But that decision will not be in our hands. It will be in the hands of someone else. We've had many conversations as local superintendents with Dr. Salmon, with the officials from the Maryland Department of Health, and with our own local officials about these topics. Dr. McKnight, I know you and the local leaders have had this conversation.
Yes. So here in Montgomery County, as you know, every county will have a plan in which they will disseminate vaccination to different groups. And so, as Dr. Smith mentioned, Montgomery County will be a part of how the county plans for that as well. And so we'll continue to talk with all of our local officials around MCPS and how we fit into that plan. I'm sure information will be coming about that.
Thank you, Dr.
very much.
Our next question is from Anika Seth, Silver Chips.
Hi, thank you so much. So my question was about buildings reopening specifically. So I guess previously the guidance was that some buildings might open, some might not, based on different zip codes, preference survey, and all of that. But today's board meeting said that it would be every building reopening. I was wondering what prompted that change. Will they all open at once? And will students be going back to their usually program school building?
I don't know if they'll all open at once or not, but it's our goal to reopen all buildings and to serve our students as well as possible. But I can't say they'll all open in phase 1 or phase 1A or 1B. But we're in the middle of that logistical analysis right now to see who is where and to what degree they will need that. And, the other part of that is staffing. I'll call on Ms. McGuire, and I know she's been heavily involved. I think she's well prepared to respond in terms of having the buildings ready to open no matter what the logistical analysis shows. Ms. McGuire?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Smith. And yes, certainly we are preparing in order to be able to open all of our buildings. And as Dr. Smith was saying, the order and phasing will, of course, depend on the health metrics as well as, the phasing and ordering of grades and levels of students that the board outlined today as their priorities. And so we'll be working towards that, but absolutely with the goal of having all buildings ready to reopen. We're well into that process now, moving through certainly materials deliveries, but also working with principals and leadership teams around setting up in buildings, as well as the HVAC and air quality work, and all of the various pieces that need to come together for having the buildings ready to open.
Thank you. Just a super quick follow-up on that then. So if some buildings are opening and some aren't in different phases, will staff members be assigned to different buildings? And if so, does that change who their supervising administrator would be in that scenario?
I don't think we have any intention to reassign staff members across buildings. But what we might find is that students might join other virtual classes across schools, in the system, but we'll have to wait and see how that plays out with our high school students and potentially middle school students. But at this time, we're putting together the 50,000 piece jigsaw puzzle of figuring out how all these pieces fit together. And so, Dr. Wilson, did you want to add to that comment? You looked like you wanted to say something.
No, I did. Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. Thank you, Dr. Smith. I know that as we think about students, especially where our parent preference survey results were high, and as we think about a relocation to another building, certainly those students will still, this is very transitional, very temporary situation. But we also know that, we are tied to our attendance systems and our technologies. So all of those logistics are being worked out if students are in fact in a different location than it is their usual typical school environment.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Our next question is from Donna St. George with the Washington Post.
Hi, Dr. Smith and everyone else. I wanted to go back to the health matrix and the differences there. Could you please describe, it seems pretty significant, the changes that were made. So could you please describe the process that was involved in making these changes? And could you also review, when you look at the old matrix versus this one, it's, it seems very different. So can you talk a little bit more about the significance of these changes?
Well, I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Turner. Actually, the framework is exactly the same. 5% positivity rate and 5 cases per 100,000 up to 15 cases per 100,000 residents in the community. That's the frame. It's the frame it's always been. The differences within that 5 to 15 is that the health professionals have said we can bring more students back more quickly. And those are very small differences. If you have 5 to 7 cases per 100,000, 7 to 9, it's when you aggregate them that they become big numbers. And you have, 10, 15, 20 more cases per 100,000 than you previously had. That's how we wind up in the situation we're in now with 40 some cases per 100,000 that Derek reported today, 48, I believe, cases per 100,000, or he can correct me when he comes on in a minute. And the process we used is we talked to the state health officials every Friday with all of the school superintendents and the state superintendent. And we also talked to the local elected officials and health officials every single week. And so they reaffirmed that framework of 5 to 15 needs to stay in place. And they reaffirmed on the 5% positivity rate needs to stay in place. And they said, but when you get below or to the 15 level and it starts dropping below 15 cases per 100,000, you have more latitude to bring in more students at that time as you're able to follow all the protocols. So Mr. Turner,
You said it very well, Dr. Smith. So if we can pull up the matrix for folks, I think that might help. So again, as Dr. Smith said, the bounds are still the same. The 5% and the 15 are still the bounds on both ends for the framework. What you're seeing is what I'm calling a collapsing of some of the stages within there. We really did have lots of deep conversations with both state and local health officials, and watching the science and the data around safe return to school. And as the data has shown, elementary students in particular are safer to return to schools, and so they represent group 1. And so with the acceleration of elementary and moving them at the 15 mark, we really think we've been able to provide, we will be able to provide more students with in-person learning opportunities and do it safely. And I think that's always been our priority throughout this process.
I would just say that I know that you say the framework is the same, but the filling in of those little boxes is completely different. So it strikes me as a more significant change than what you're saying. I mean, this will bring a lot more students back on campus with a higher number of cases per 100,000, right?
That is true.
Go ahead, Mr. Turner, that's fine.
So that is true, and that has been our goal, is to accelerate when we know it is safe. And based on our conversations, we know that the data and science are telling us that is safer to bring more students back at the 15 level, especially when those are younger students. What I think looks different is we had more rows. So there was a group 3, and that we've removed group 3 since there's only 2 groups going in now. And there was a lot of language around consideration. I think part of our framework before, we had an area that was orange where we were considering based on where the science was going, and that consideration is still there, but it's a little clearer for our community to understand in this model.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Our next question, Randy Bass from WDVM.
Good afternoon. Thanks for taking my question. I'll pose this to Dr. Smith and Dr. McNider if anybody else would like to answer. If the new restrictions that were enacted today by the council, along with the distribution of the vaccine in coming weeks, don't work to lower the current rate of transmission, do you foresee school leaders continuing to push the return to school off by a few weeks at a time, or will it come to a point where students just won't go back to school this year?
I don't think there's any way to answer that question at this time. I think we're going to have to let it play out and see what the effect is, and then answer that question at the point when our health officials are saying to us, we're not able to bend this curve. And we're going to continue to work on it and think about it, because we take direction from the Maryland State Department of Health, the Maryland State Superintendent, and our local health officials. And so we'll just continue to work with them and not try to predict what's going to happen beyond what the health professionals, the predictions they're making.
Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. We have a follow-up question from Caitlin Peets, Bethesda Beat.
Hi again. I just wanted to expand on Donna's question. Sorry, my dog wants to jump in. So looking at the matrix that is out today, the revised matrix compared to a screenshot of the matrix that was available as late as yesterday, there actually does seem to be another difference. You had a lot of the groups where in the old matrix, there were a lot of students who would not have come back unless the case rate was less than 5 per 100,000. And today it's, 5 to 15. Was that change made some other time? Do you not consider that a change to the matrix? Can you please just clarify that?
Happy to. And so I think people were reading that the green box that said everyone under 5 was the only way we're going to get there. And as you can see in the old matrix, there were plenty of opportunities for consideration and potential transition to virtual in the 5 to 10. We just had more flexible language as we didn't have the science and data that we do now. Now we can be a little more aggressive knowing what we know and given the guidance from our health officials.
Okay, and then just building off of that separately, but there are 2 phases now to bring students back. But is it really that different when you look at the groups within the phases? Is there time between the groups within the phases to come back? Can you elaborate on that part for me?
Well, the work we do with phase 1 will inform every phase after that. So we'll prepare. But the first day that students who've never been to school before, like first graders and kindergartners, or kindergartners who went last year for just part of the year, 3/4 of the year, and now they haven't been back, that's going to be very different than bringing 7th graders or 9th graders into school. So as we bring groups of students in, that will inform our work on how quickly we can bring more students in and other groups of students in, while we follow all the protocols of physical distancing, mask wearing, sanitation of environments and our hands, and all of those things. So, so there are not dates there because we don't know the amount of time that will be required, but certainly the more we bring students in, the more it informs our work and we learn from what's happening, then the more skillful we'll get at bringing students back in the system through transportation, through health services, through all of those environmental things that, we've never we've served over 7 million meals since last March. We've not served a single meal inside a school building since last March 12th, not one. So I really push on you and all the other people in the community to think about that. And so as we bring students into schools, we'll have to learn as adults and as students who were in schools before this happened, and as students who've been in very little school or no school at all, how to operate in this environment until it's not this environment anymore. And then we'll be back to a different world than the one.
Right. I guess I just wanted to be clear, within the phases, there are the groups. Is there a set, is there time between the groups within the phases to come back? That was all my question was.
But we don't know how much time that will be.
Okay.
I'm going to make a commitment to it right now.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Next question, the Richard Montgomery Tide, Rachel Wang.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. So my question's about the educator staffing for reopening. So with school reopening in February, how will the current pool of educators manage both the hybrid and the virtual learning models at the same time? And as a follow-up, I guess, what plans are set to fill the potential staffing gaps that might arise?
Dr. McKnight, you've been doing a tremendous amount of work around this question, along with Dr. Wilson and others. So I'll defer to you on all of the plans you're making.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rachel. Great question. So we'll go back to that. I think Dr. Smith said 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. So that's exactly what it is.
50,000 piece.
Yes. What we have found to do is think about what were some of the traditional models that we've had in place that will actually, in staffing, how we staff in a normal year and how that can translate into this virtual environment. And so we know that in a normal circumstances, there's not one person or one body that has to form a master schedule for a school. It's many people. It's our administrators, it's our teachers who all have knowledge around their subject areas, their teams, and all of those things. So a big part of what we will do moving forward in our plan is to have our school leadership teams be very engaged along with the principal and others on how to utilize our staff to meet the needs of our students based on the preferences that our families have made in this process. And so our leadership teams will have a key role in that because they normally do, as they should, in the scheduling process. And so that will be their opportunity to look at what are the available resources, what is the need, and being able to connect the two. And that's where those conversations will come into place at the local school level of, in what grades do we utilize these resources in this way? And even in what courses do we look at that may be a better alignment to the virtual environment, more so than another. And so to have our schools and the staff engaged in that discussion as they know their areas of expertise, as well as their students best, will be a collaborative process that we look forward to engaging in.
All right, thank you. And as a follow-up to that, would teachers be expected to manage both like a hybrid and an in-person teaching, or would that be up to each case?
So again, that's going to be a big part of what we look at in terms of looking at all of the resources and needs of what we have to provide in the school building. And I think our staff are best to make some recommendations around how they do that to be able to serve the needs of our students. And so we depend on them to be able to share that with us.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. McKnight. We have time for just 2 more questions. The first one is from Kate Taylor with the New York Times, and then Anika Seth will wrap us up.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. What do you anticipate for the fall of 2021? Are you anticipating a return to 5-day-a-week in-person school in the fall of 2021?
We are planning that will be the case, and we're doing our work right now around that assumption. And we, of course, will stay very alert and aware of the circumstances in our community and in our state and nation and world. But that is our plan right now. We are also, though, planning to have a full virtual program that will be available to families who need that and have those circumstances in life that require it going forward, because we know that that is going to be an important part of education going forward. And Mr. Turner has been doing a lot of work around that, and we're going to continue to revise and build out and think about how those 2 platforms will exist, the in-person and the virtual, and then how we can continue to integrate them to provide all of the services that students need across the community. Mr. Turner, do you have?
No, I think you covered it, that we really have to think about the virtual is just a part of who we are moving forward, and it's going to be with us, and it's a good thing. We've learned a lot of how we can be efficient and effective in reaching students in a different way and providing students with new opportunities. So we want to build on that and learn from this opportunity and this challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Anika?
Thank you so much. I had one question, but before I get to that one, I wanted to follow up really quickly on Rachel's point from earlier. If we're talking about hiring new educators or something like that, where is the funding for that going to come from, especially given the forecasted revenue losses for FY22? And are those posts going to be cut after we get back to like a fully in-person model?
Well, one of the things we've been planning for in the recovery program in this year's budget, the current funding, is the need for more staff as we transition back to in-person. The real budget threats, we think at this point, are going to be in the fiscal year 22 budget that starts July 1st. And we're very, very concerned about those fiscal threats, both at the state and local level, and what's going to happen there. And so that's how we're thinking about the budget. And in terms of the positions being cut, because we're a very large system and we have 24,000 employees, it's not usually an issue of people losing their jobs, rather that we just shift positions as needed. And one of the things this pandemic has done is stretched us so that many of the people who work in the system are doing alternative duties and roles to support the environment we're in now, and that will shift back to the traditional roles, or they'll shift to all new roles that none of us even have envisioned yet as the world evolves. And so that will certainly be a big part of the work that we'll have to continue to do, and we want to do, because that means we'll serve students more effectively if we have the adults doing the work that's most needed.
Thank you. So the question that I wanted to ask before that came up was, so I guess the union has been expressing a lot of animosity or tension about a lack of ability for teachers who might live with at-risk people to opt out of teaching in person. So I was wondering, what provisions exist in place for teachers like that to maybe teach fully remotely, or what things is MCPS currently considering in light of the union's frustration?
We're going to need a lot of people to continue on in the virtual program. And we've also been communicating with individual staff members about their individual circumstances. And that's been an ongoing process that we've been engaged in over the last couple of months. Dr. McKnight, any additional thoughts that you want to share about that process that you've been engaged in?
Sure, Dr. Smith, thank you. We put up a website for our staff members as well, where they're able to be able to share if there are any circumstances that they're working through in which they'll need that support. So we've shared that with our staff members. We, will continue to look at that and utilize that information. So we have provided an opportunity for staff members to be able to share with the system if there are any circumstances that they would like to be considered in their preparedness to be able to support in-person learning.
Thank you so much. I appreciate both your answers.
We are out of time. We want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon for the press briefing. If you have additional questions, please reach out to the communications staff via email, and we'll be sure to answer those questions. We also have availability for those who may need an interview in Spanish. You can also connect with us via email, and we can get that set up for this afternoon. Again, so thank you for joining us, and stay safe, everyone.